You know, there are a lot of myths and sayings in mixed martial arts, especially when it comes to judging. And one of them is to be the man, you got to beat the man. That's not true. Nowhere in the unified rules of mixed martial arts does it say you have to beat the man to be the man. You just have to win more rounds, and then you beat the man. Hey, everybody, I'm TJ De Santis. Let's talk about some judges' decisions. And 2020 has had a lot of ups and downs for a variety of reasons, none of really which pertain exclusively to mixed martial arts. We're in the midst of a pandemic, but something long plaguing the sport of MMA has been questionable judging. And one of the more questionable decisions was on display earlier this year here in 2020, and that was the light heavyweight title defense of one Jon Jones as he took home a unanimous decision over Dominick Reyes, a decision that 2/3 of the media that scored that bout on MMADecisions.com scored it for one Dominick Reyes, but that wasn't the case. Here to break things down with me on the Scoring Senate, a man you're very familiar with. He is Ian McCall. He was on the last show. I guess you're the elder statesman here, Ian.
I know I'm the old guy now. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, congrats. You've made it. The old man. You are flanked by one of MMA's favorite ladies, Ashley Evans Smith, the Rebel Girl. Ashley, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Appreciate you coming on. And then one Mr. Yves Edwards, the Thug Jitsu master himself. How are you?
That's me. I am doing well, my man.
What's going on with that hair?
I'm changing it up.
I like it.
That looks good, man.
I like it. I mean,
let it flourish.
I bring it up because one, Todd Duffee was like, what is going on with that hair? I think it actually like traumatized Todd for a moment. And look at that. Look at those locks right there.
Over there.
My goodness. Like, is there any product in that hair, Duffy, or is that just all natural?
All natural. I won't touch product.
There you go.
I'm actually balding right now. I don't know if you can see it's starting to happen already.
Okay, if that's balding, I don't want to talk about it. All right, I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about this scorecard, though. I mentioned one of the myths in MMA scoring is to be the man, you got to beat the man, meaning you need to be more decisive than the champion needs to over you to earn the scorecard. That's not true. You just need to win more rounds, by a margin of 1 point or more. But the other sort of myth in combat sports and mixed martial arts in particular is the idea of a unanimous decision. So there were 5 rounds, multiply that by 3 because there's 3 judges. So there were 15 different individual scores. Would the panel like to guess how many rounds all of the judges were actually unanimous in? Because it's a lot lower than you might think.
2.
2? You got the are we like Price is Right it? Is that how this is going to work?
Yes.
Okay, so if you say 1, you would be incorrect. 2 is correct. Rounds 4 and 5 agreed upon by all 3 judges. But rounds 1, 2, and 3, there was no unanimous decision in any of that. It was split across the board. You had Marcos Rosales and Joe Solis scoring the first round for Dominick Reyes. Chris Lee scored that round for... actually, you know what? They did agree on that one. I'm dyslexic, apparently. So they agreed on 3 rounds. But we don't have a unanimous decision whatsoever. That's my point. Damn it. The only thing I'm better at than growing hair is adding up judges' scorecards, which, as you can tell, I'm not very good at.
I'm really good at 3. I'm really bad at 3 things, and that's singing and counting.
Right. But 1, 2... Never mind. We'll leave it alone.
I see what you did there, Yves.
Yeah. my point is this, though. The judges have issues agreeing at all. But as long as you have the same score, like, for example, Marcos Rosales and Chris Lee had the same score, but their method to getting there was not the same at all. They differed on round 2. all of you have fought. All of you have been on, in an arena on fight night.
Hey, Ian? Huh? Am I right?
Okay, so by a show of hands, who feels that they have been robbed in a judge's decision thus far in their career? So 50% of the panel. There we go. Ian got robbed in more than just one decision. It might have derailed his entire career, unfortunately.
It happens, but we just got to move on.
But we don't have to move on. That's the problem. That's why we're here. Actually, we're here to not move on and to try to correct the problem. When you look at the case of Jon Jones and Dominick Reyes, I do feel, especially in the case of the first round, where Dominick Reyes comes out and does something that a lot of people really hadn't seen happen to Jon Jones. That's bully him, outstrike him, set the pace of a fight. Jon Jones usually does that. Unfortunately for Reyes, he sort of faded, and that may have been why he lost on some of the judges' scorecards the round via points. But let's start with you, Ian. Your thoughts on this fight. How did you score the bout?
I had 1, 2, 3 for Reyes because I felt like he did enough in those rounds to win with the striking, with his pressure, with his movement, with everything. He was doing more damage, but each round we saw those scales start to tip in the other direction much more. And by the 4th and 5th round, you see Jon take over, as Jon always does. He lets you do whatever you want to do and show everyone what you can show, and and I guess try and lay your claim to being a legitimate contender. And then he drags you into deep water and he fucking drowns you. And that's exactly what he did here. Granted, he wasn't able to finish anybody, but I honestly think Dominick Reyes won the first 3 rounds, and I think Jon, he didn't get sloppy, he didn't get lazy or anything. He just maybe miscalculated on this one, and I truly think that Reyes pulled this one off from a strictly judging standpoint. I think just the numbers-wise, Dominick should have had this fight.
Okay, so a clean sweep through rounds 1 through 3 for Ian McCall for Dominick Reyes. Yves Edwards, how did you score the bout?
I scored it similar to Ian. Rounds 1 and 2, I gave those 2 rounds to Dominick Reyes. He was pretty dominant early in the first round. He kind of controlled that round. The second round, not so much, but I did give him the edge. But then the third, that's where, that race started to even out. And I feel that Jon caught up to him there and was able to stifle his counters, keep the pressure on, make him miss, even though he was countering sometimes, and edge out that round. And then 4 and 5, I gave those 2 rounds to Jon. I think he was more like the Jon Jones that we've seen in the past in those 2 rounds than any other rounds in the fight. But he still was never as dominant as we were used to seeing him. I think when the fight happened, I felt that Dominick Reyes won this. But going back and watching it, very, very close, and I'm not 100% that Jon Jones should win this fight. I completely understand the argument on the other side, but scoring it myself this time around, that third round was everything to me, and I think Jon Jones just edged that one out just a little.
So you mentioned that the third round was everything to you. The third round essentially was everything for Jon Jones on the 3 judges' scorecards as well. The judges, Chris Lee and Joe Solis, gave the third round to Jon Jones, and without that round, he doesn't win the scorecard on 2 of the judges' cards. Joe Solis had him 49-46, which I think is really the big narrative here. That's the scorecard that makes a somewhat contentious and controversial decision even more so, because nobody besides Joe Solis on the planet seemed to score 4 rounds to Jon Jones, but he did on that night in Houston. Looking at the panel, so we are split. Ian has the fight for Dominick Reyes. Yves Edwards has the fight for Jon Jones. Ashley, how did you score the fight?
So similar to Ian and Yves in the sense that round 1, round 2, I think we can all agree that those were Dominick's more aggressive. Just even though he's backing up, he's controlling the pace. So I differ from Yves in the sense that round 3, Reyes threw more combos, and even though Jon's attempted a takedown, I think Reyes capitalized off that with short elbows, and that sealed it for me for round 3. Round 4, that also was Reyes, in my opinion. And even though he's fading, he's still firing back and he's still setting the pace. I wrote down a couple notes, but basically that every time Jon Jones takes him down, Reyes gets right back up. So what do you hold more weight on? And for me, I held more weight in the sense that, regardless of Jones trying to take him down, he still got back up. So 1-4 were for Reyes. And then, in round 5, he's diminishing. Jones is getting off lower body strikes, spinning back kicks, all these things, and he's just picking him apart to the point where if there was 1 or 2 more rounds, maybe Jones would have won it then, but he didn't come back until the 5th round, which to me isn't enough.
I don't hate it. I don't hate a 49-46 Dominick Reyes card by any means, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I want to figure out what Todd Duffee says, because, again, right now, we're similar to the judges on that night in Houston where we have 3 cards turned in. Not one of them agree round by round. We do not have a unanimous decision, a unanimous card yet. Todd Duffee, your thoughts. How did you score the bout?
I think 1 and 2 were pretty clear for Reyes. Round 3, I actually thought was the closest round to score. But I still scored it for Reyes just because although Jones controlled the distance, he controlled kind of the action on where it was supposed to go, he had no damage. And again, just like Ashley said, Reyes stifled Jones's attempts to take the fight elsewhere, although he kind of didn't control the cage the entire time.
Right.
Again, I kind of agree with Ashley on round 4. Although Reyes' posture was terrible, I still think he was fighting back. I still think he kept that round very, very close. It was probably as close as round 3, but I still think Jones won the round 4 just by control. And Reyes' posture, he was looking like a hurt animal.
Right. And
I know that kind of persuades people's opinion very quickly. I almost still scored it for Reyes, and if I probably watched it again, I might, just off damage. Because I scored damage over control. Round 5 was rather clearly Jones, but again, if you pick one or the other, which is more important in a fight, damage or control, I choose damage because it's leading to the end of a fight. It's leading to a finality. Whereas control is just like, let me ride this out, which I don't think you're actually fighting in that sense.
Right.
So I haven't seen the fight before. I know there's a lot of controversy, but it looks rather clear to me that it was Reyes.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. I think most of the MMA world agreed with you. One thing that you hit on, Todd, that I think is really at the center of most judging controversies is, what do you reward, damage or control? If you're a fighter that is a striker and you're taken down, but the grappler that takes you down does absolutely nothing to you, did you really lose the fight? No, you kind of lost the game, right? Like, mixed martial arts at the end of the day is a game, and unfortunately, when it's not settled in the cage or the octagon, you got to go to points, and there are points that are weighed differently. And unfortunately, the way that we score mixed martial arts in a lot of ways, it's based on effective striking and grappling, and then aggression and control. And at the end of the day, there's no word of damage, and that is, I think, unfortunate when you think about someone who effectively uses their striking, and you converse that with someone that effectively uses their grappling. I mean, effective grappling, if you're a world-class striker and you're much better at striking than I am, me holding you down is effective for sure, because I'm not playing your game. But at the same time, I'm not really trying to finish the fight. And that's where I think efficiency, it's kind of code for damage, but it also isn't at the same time, because, a grappler's efficient grappling is not as damaging as a striker's efficient striking. Yves, you fought many a times. What are your thoughts on that coded word, effective and efficient? Because I do feel like we're supposed to believe that if your attack is efficient, it's damaging, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, no. Control is not damaging at all. And I agree with that argument that damage should be scored more. I think when we get in there to fight, everybody wants to try to finish. That whole thing about not leaving it in the hands of the judges, nobody wants that to happen. But you're going up against some of the best people in the world, and you're not going to be able to affect, damage all the time. Say Ian and I are the same size, and if Ian can get on top of me, I'm going to scramble it to get up, and if he can't, effectively keep me down to a position where he can control me and hit me, then he's not going to be able to get that damage off. So I mean, if this was just striking, kickboxing, or boxing, damage matters more.
Right.
So much more. But because of the controls of the grappling aspects of fighting, you have to be able to control someone to affect that damage. And so in mixed martial arts, you just kind of have to pick your poison.
Right.
And when it gets to the end of it and you have to score it, you have to put points on the board. You have to pick your poison as to what criteria matters the most. And I do believe that in the scoring system, damage does matter more than control. But
it's not spelled out that way, though, unfortunately. It needs to be. It's one of those things that I said, again, it's vague. Like the criteria is literally, it's based on effective striking and grappling. And then
words are improperly used.
Right,
That's
right.
what it is.
Yeah,
it's fucking linguistics.
Right.
We're not using the words right. What they actually mean. Something's hot. That means you touch it and it burns you.
Right.
Not that it's fucking cool, you idiots.
Right.
That's just how it works.
Right.
That's how the human condition is. So we have to use that. Efficiency for me is, okay, I'm efficient at holding you down. I'm efficiently using my energy.
Right.
Damage and efficiency, just the wordage for me doesn't really line up.
I absolutely
not that applicable to that term.
I absolutely adore that you just said something is hot. It means it's hot, not that it's cool. You idiots. Because if it's hot, it can't be cool, right? No.
Yeah,
different kind of cool altogether.
Cool. That's me using the word cool.
Right. How do hot and cool mean the same exact thing in a roundabout? I don't get it. Doesn't make any sense.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, join us next time as we break down other words that have multiple definitions and try to. No, but
I'm gonna have a Paris on the show. We're gonna break down the fight.
Let's go back to round 3 though, because Yves, you said that you scored round 3 for Jon Jones. And I think there may be a variety of reasons that you did that. Dominick Reyes starts to visibly slow down in that round. However, Jon Jones went for a takedown. It was stuffed by Reyes. I think that that doesn't necessarily score points for the defensive fighter, but when you are outstriking a fighter and they try to take you down, I think that does, or at least should, speak to the judges. Reyes was outstriking Jon Jones in that round. He did finish that round with more strikes than Jones landed. But I think a lot of the issue with anyone that did score that round for Jon Jones was the fact that Reyes visibly looked tired. His output was much slower. And Jon Jones was doing something that almost always wins you around in MMA. I mean, it won most of the fights, I think, for Leonard Garcia in his career. And that was, he was moving forward. And if you move forward in mixed martial arts, judges reward you for it. Now that you know that Dominick Reyes outlanded Jon Jones, Yves, do you feel any different about turning in that scorecard for Jones?
I don't necessarily feel different because the damage that he was affecting wasn't very effective. He may have landed more shots, but if Jon Jones, he's not reacting to those shots the way he did in rounds 1 and 2. He's pressing forward through them. He's looking to be more offensive and to control more. And I think the control and the damage there negate each other, and now pressure comes into play in my mind because Jon Jones, although he's being countered at times, the shots that are countering him, they're not slowing him down from trying to shoot that takedown or press Reyes up against the fence and get to a spot where he can be in more control. So I felt that Jon won that round simply because the damage being affected by Reyes it's kind of like point fighting at that point. He's touching him possibly, but he's not slowing him down. He's not deterring him. He's not making Jon Jones stop the pressure that's causing him to wilt.
One thing that I was kind of looking at when you watch the UFC broadcast, and obviously we watched the archive, we weren't, in the arena scoring it like the judges were, was the graphics that the UFC puts up on the screen, the significant strike total. First off, you want to talk about ambiguous. I don't know what significant strike means. I've been told the definition time and time again, but I have no idea what makes a strike significant and otherwise insignificant for, that point. But quality over quantity, I think, is something that definitely needs to be appraised. Ashley, let me ask you this. I know you got to get going soon. But when you are fighting someone and it's a pretty close fight on the feet, are you at all aware in your mind whether or not you're landing more effective strikes than, say, your opponent and what your efficiency rating is? Or is that just all a blur throughout the course of war?
No, I mean, everyone's different, obviously, but when your punch connects with someone's face or their body, you can feel it. When you miss, when it's a clean shot. So, like, I guess we were talking about the definition of a significant strike. If the judges don't know what it is, I feel like the fighter does, the person who's getting hit and the person who's throwing the strike, because you both feel it. And that's something that the judges can't see.
Right.
So I don't know how we can transfer that into the scoring system. But yeah, to answer your question, I know when I'm hurting my opponent, I know when I'm not, when I'm out of range, and then you make that adjustment in the moment so that you can go from just striking to significant strikes.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think what you're saying right there is the fighters knowing more than the judges what's significant, what isn't, is a lot of the reason why fighters sometimes like stick out their tongues when they get hit, to sort of be like, look, that didn't hurt me. I want to make a point to the judges that it didn't land with any sort of impact, and I'm fine.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Yeah. So
A lot of times it's kind of faking it, though.
Of
Yeah.
course, 100%. Yeah. I mean,
It's a big game.
right. I just realized I asked the panel how many of you felt that you came out on the wrong end of a judge's decision, and 2 of the 4 raised their hand, and then I realized Todd Duffee has never seen the final bell. Like, it hasn't. He either takes care of it, or I mean, heavyweights, man, heavyweights.
Ooh.
What for?
I believe in damage. No, I just simply believe in damage. I think it's the epitome of what a fight's supposed to be about. It's about a finality.
Right.
But we're talking about fighting versus sport. This is a sport now.
Right. I mean, well, that's the problem, Todd. I'll ask you that question right there. Like, at the end of the day, what are we supposed to be evaluating? Is it effective martial art ability, or is it effective adaptation to martial arts skills to make sure that you win after the course of 15 minutes or 25 minutes? Because I think those are 2 different things.
I think GSP answered that question for us a long time ago. It's a sport, and that's just the reality of it. My question, though, is for Yves. What's the difference between control and pressure? Because you were talking about pressure negating the damage in the round 3 of Reyes. Like, it negated his damage because of that pressure. And then you're also like breaking it down, the difference between control and pressure. And I was just kind of like, what do you see? How do you see those as different things? Because I feel like pressure is control typically.
Pressure,
but it may not be
control, but I do see them as different things. The
Right.
pressure of moving forward, he's pushing Reyes back. Reyes is backpedaling and trying to counter. So he's trying to find his own openings. But Jon Jones is dictating with his pressure. Now control is when Jon has him in a spot that he like putting somebody up against the fence, having the underhook up against the fence. That's a control position rather than being neutral up against the fence. Even though you still are slightly in control, you have a lot less control than having the underhook. Same thing with top and bottom position. When you're on top, that's control, and but also like from side control, you put the pressure on somebody, you put your weight on somebody, that's pressure. But that's more of a control position than a pressure position. You know what I mean?
All right.
That's
Yeah.
All right. Timeout, because Ashley Evans Smith has places to go and things to do.
Fine.
So we're going to let her go. Are you off to do a new episode of your podcast, Ashley?
Sure. Yes, I am.
Okay. Really? Is that what you're doing?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the way out, tell everyone where they can check it out and what content and subjects you cover, because it's not your typical MMA podcast.
Yeah, it's not. It's an MMA podcast, but instead of talking about, your normal fight stuff, we talk about how each fighter or fight-related guest, their dating life, relationships, love, romance, and even sex, which is pretty controversial. But it could be PG-13, like a Sam Alvey episode, or it can get, XXX rated. I got Ian McCall on one day.
Uh-oh.
So, I fucked that one up.
You're really getting to know the personal lives and the personal side of these fighters. Everyone wants to know about their fight camps and all this stuff, but I think it's humanizing the fighters to these people that are followers or listeners or fans, and see them as just this, kind of action figure,
Sure.
so they get to know their background and what their lives are like right now, whether they're married, they're single, are they shy? I mean, the whole spectrum is covered from, how they learned about how they learned about sex, how they lost their virginity, to what they like in bed now. And it's, I'd say, a mix between Howard Stern and Joe Rogan, somewhere like that.
That's quite the mix. I like it. All right.
Spotify.
Spotify. What's that?
Are most of your guests on Tinder, Ashley?
99% of my guests are either in the UFC or have been in the UFC, with the 1% being an adult entertainer. You guys can find it at Sex and Violence with Rebel Girl on Instagram. It's kind of long. And Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts, Sex and Violence with Rebel Girl.
Ashley, appreciate the time. Have fun with the podcast.
Thanks, guys.
There she is, Ashley Evans Smith. Tagging off actually what Ashley was saying, kind of covering in her podcast the lifestyle as well as the sporting side of mixed martial arts, actually brings me to another point, I think, when it comes to judging and why at times we see a lot of hurt feelings. Like there's a saying that if you're a stick and ball sport, you're an athlete in one of those sports, that you play your game. But you don't play fighting, you fight. And I think that goes to really the larger point here of why we need judging to be correct is this isn't a game. And while it may be a sport, it is a sport where if you lose on a Saturday night, that decision may affect you in a lot of ways for the rest of your career. Looking at Yves Edwards' story, I think Yves is someone that very well should own a UFC lightweight title at home. But the reason I don't think that he was ever really afforded that opportunity was the judges screwed up Cara Uno and BJ Penn at UFC 41, and it sent the division upside down on its head. As we move forward talking about Jones and Reyes, Eve, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that, because I think that a lot of people will see a contentious, close decision and argue one way or the other and really not understand the lasting effects of what that decision really means, because it means a lot more than just the winner and loser on fight night.
Yeah, it affects the whole division. I have a problem with mixed martial arts scoring, especially in the fact that it's based on scoring from boxing. But our type of fighting has so many different aspects to it. And I truly think the best scoring system for mixed martial arts is the old Pride scoring system, where you judge the fight as a whole. And even that's not perfect, but I do think that is much better than what we have today. And I think even better would be, like, what we're doing when we fight is we're really, like, people don't want to admit this, but we're pretending to murder people. That's what we're doing. We're playing murder.
Right.
So, like, when
I've been murdering people. I don't know what you're talking about, bro. Those guys are dead.
No, seriously. I mean, in the end, like, if the situation, not even if the situation, in the end, right? Like, you choke somebody out. Like, if this was for this is a skill. This is a life skill. This is a skill to preserve your life, right? So
right.
It choke someone out, you would be able to get away from that situation completely. Or if it was threatening your life, you put them out of their misery, right? Same thing. You break an arm, now they have one less weapon to compete against you. That's why a submission ends the fight, because if it should go longer and continue, like, the person that breaks the other guy's arm is most likely going to kill that other guy.
Right.
If you're fighting for your life.
I mean, yeah. Or if you get a choke, you just never let go.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, when you judge a fight, and I think you should judge it in its entirety. And from what you've seen inside the 15 to 25 minutes of competition, if one of those guys seems that if this continues on forever, or until one of these guys falls, the guy who's ahead, the guy who you believe is going to continue winning that event, is the one that I think should win. That's how I look at it.
The hardest part about the Pride scoring system, and I think there are a lot of values to it, Eve, because I think you should, in a roundabout way, reward who won the overall fight, because, I mean, that's how we would score it if it were in the playground, right? Like, whoever finishes stronger, whoever establishes dominance. Like, if you lose rounds 1 through 4, but the person is not going to be able to fight 1 second longer, otherwise they'll lose, you should largely win that fight because you've rendered them essentially incapacitated, but they were saved by the bell. You would like to reward the fighter that essentially finished the fight, but that's not how it works with the unified scoring system here in the United States. But the issue is with the Pride scoring system, there's no math. There's no way for you to actually show and improve your work. And maybe that is something that we need to just sort of get away from. The idea that a judge needs to explain their decisions and you can follow it, along with it on paper. I still, though, think that the thought process is really what needs to be unified. And from my standpoint, the best way to get everyone on the same page is to follow the 10-point must system, 10s and 9s and 8s, and sometimes maybe even 7s. And the hardest part of that, though, is going to be getting people to think and see the same way. How do we do that?
So this sport being so much more intricate, there's so much more complexity to what we're doing. It's not just these. Okay, we've got like 6 other points we're hitting with, plus throws and submissions and everything. It's a much different thing. So, and this is just my first idea for the numbers was take every category, take striking, grappling, aggression, whatever points we come up with, and start each one with 5 points. You have 5 points on either side, and it's kind of one of those little abacus scales. You can kind of figure out the numbers that way because there's got to be a much more complex system here. And then when you look into the judging the whole fight as itself, of course, I look at that fight and I look what Jon has done in his whole career. He's the champ. You come to him. You come fight him. You take what is his. And it's weird because I've been thinking about this back and forth while we were doing it. From an actual numbers standpoint, I feel like Dominick won.
Right.
But from in here and in here, I'm going, I don't know if you did enough to beat the champ, to be honest.
But that's not a thing. Like, that's what I was saying at the beginning of the show. Like, to be the man, you got to beat the man. That's not a thing. You just got to win more rounds than the man.
I know. That's why I put my feelings aside and I put the analytics in of who I think actually won from a number standpoint.
Right.
But when you understand the rest of it, when you are that immersed like we are in this, where you go, okay, there's more to it.
Sure.
Those final rounds should have some sort of extra point system scenario that they can get. Maybe not. Maybe.
Well, you brought that up last time. You brought that up last time, and I don't hate it.
I just don't know.
I don't hate it. One thing that I do think that the big thing that you're hitting on, Ian, is momentum. When you score the fight as a whole, in a roundabout way, you just need to be winning, the last part of it, right? Which, I mean, mixed martial arts is one of the only sports that we have where the athletes and competitors don't see the scoreboard. They have no idea if they're winning or losing. Yeah. And beyond that,
that's what I was gonna bring up.
And beyond that, like, you can be winning the fight at the end of the fight, but if you haven't won more rounds leading up to that, you can't win. Like, it's already lost, which, again, think about that. Think about, I'm winning. I think that I've won the fight. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, but it's a fruitless effort. Todd, your thoughts on open scoring? We've seen this a little bit over the last year. Kansas has implemented it. Do you think open scoring is something that is good for the sport as a whole, and do you think it would have changed this fight at all between Jones and Reyes?
I think it would have changed it drastically, and that's what I wrote down while I was listening to Ian talk. I was like, we absolutely have to have an open scoring. I think it's absurd that we don't.
I'm doing that right now.
Yeah. I don't think Jones lost. Like, Jones didn't lose that fight, right? But he didn't win it either. Like, if you go round by round, just kind of what, like, Ian's talking about. But I think if you go round by round scoring, Jones may come out and have a different game plan, because the reality is Jones thinks he's winning round 3 because he's doing what he wants to do.
Right.
Right? So he feels like he's winning, but if he knows he just lost round 1 and 2, and then he sees that he lost round 3 to one or two of these judges, he's going to come out way different rounds 4 and 5. And yeah, again, Reyes looked pretty rough rounds 4 and 5, but maybe he doesn't act that way if there's an open scoring. Maybe he's forced to come out of his shell if Jones comes out more. I think Reyes was more effective probably in round 4, but because of his posture, because of his defensive nature, I again scored it for Jones, but I don't know. I think open scoring is a must. I don't even understand the logic as to why it doesn't exist. Can anybody explain that to me?
Let me and I don't agree with this. I don't think everybody does this, but I do think there's a fair amount of guys that will. If you're ahead in a 3-round bout, 2-0, and you know that going in, like
So Reyes just did it.
there's some guys who are going to risk it though, who aren't going to risk it though. They're going to get on their bicycle and they're not going to engage and they're going to make the fight boring. You know what I mean?
Do you think though,
Right.
Yves? Do you think that a judge needs to tell a fighter that for them to coast, or do you think that they're just going to coast because they feel like, well, yeah, the judges probably know what they're
Reyes
looking
was
at?
coasting.
Yeah,
I think Reyes thought he won and he was coasting.
I think he was
Yeah,
tired.
and I think you will see more
Yeah,
of that, especially like, and this is probably going to upset some people, maybe not, I don't know, but I'm going to say it anyway. When if you implement that, right, you will have to change the whole pay system in mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
Because like nobody thinks about, like Todd, Ian, we've never thought being underneath somebody or in a bad position, like, oh, I got to get out of here so I can get that other half of the paycheck.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody's ever thought that. But if you're telling me, well, I'm gonna get $100,000 more now because I'm up 2 rounds and I don't have to risk that anymore. Like that's more incentive to get on your bicycle, I think. You know,
Yeah.
for some guys, especially with the way you're paying fighters. So like you put all that money up front, then you implement open scoring. But without that, you're going to see a lot of guys start to run, especially in the realm of being in the UFC and being concerned about losing and getting cut.
What if you were to change the pay model to, obviously you have your show money, and then maybe you have 2 win bonuses. One would be a straight win bonus. The other would be a finish bonus. Is that something that would be, something that would sort of negate what you're saying?
I disagree with any kind of bonus for anything other than performing inside the cage, because there's not a lot of time to think about all these other things. And when you're putting in your time in the gym, everybody's putting in their time in the gym and they expect to win. They plan to win these fights. So they're working for that full purse the entirety of their camp anyway. So like, and that's like a throwback thing. That's in the beginning of mixed martial arts, maybe 20 years ago, 15, 10 years ago, maybe. But at this point now, like, get rid of that. That's one, right? And I think that also helps on the other side of fights. I think that helps guys fight more like who they are. Guys who are concerned about losing a contract and or the other side of the bonus. They're not thinking about that before the fight, but when you have bills to pay and you're in training camp, you're thinking about that beforehand. So like, even though that's not in the forefront of your mind, it's still subtly and subconsciously in your mind that you want to make that money. So if you feel like you've won 2 and you don't want to take a chance because you're 145 pounder and you're fighting Jeremy Stephens in his prime, right? Then you're not going to really risk standing in front of that guy.
I saw this guy fight Jeremy Stephens in his prime in Seattle, Washington. Didn't work out so well for Jeremy Stephens.
Yeah, but that was the first round.
Okay. All right.
Just back to like the pay structure. I think it's asinine that there is a pay structure in that way. It doesn't even make sense. My last fight, I had an eye poke. All I'm thinking about is how can I get enough time for my eye to adjust so I can see properly, so I can get my extra 30K. That's all I was thinking about. So I think it also puts guys at a bigger risk to do things that they may not necessarily need to do. What if you're injured? What if you can't see? All I was thinking about is like, if I can get enough time, I can get back out there. Just give me time. Because all I was worried about was getting my extra paycheck.
Right.
Because I knew that.
Sorry, Scott, but to piggyback off of what you just said, as an example, like the only time that you thought about that was when the action was stopped and your eye was hurt, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about winning the entire time, regardless.
There's no concern about the dollar amount.
Right. I'm just thinking about winning. My whole concern is winning. But that's why I think the entire idea of having a show win bonus is absurd. It's just crazy. It doesn't even make sense. Like, I'm going to go out there and try to lose a fight and get physically harmed and change my life forever? Probably not. Like one punch can change a guy's entire life. And people don't really want to register that or accept that reality. But that man may walk out there and never be the same again for the rest of his life.
I mean,
that's just the truth.
You can argue that I think even on a good night that is possible. You can get your hand raised and
Right.
still go through.
Never be the same.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that says a lot about the weight. You know, the weight of any fight, any encounter, any stanza, especially every decision. And when you're playing with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over the course of a few fights based on the decision of one fight, I mean, the last thing I would ever want to be is a judge, because if you get it wrong, man, you don't just let down like one person in one moment. It's going to affect far more than you can ever really even imagine. We'll close on this because I think that perception is reality. And, you know, what Ashley was talking about a little while ago was the two fighters that are involved really are the only ones that know how effective something was. It's the reaction, it's the impact, and it's the effect of any technique. And that can be hidden. You're in there with another professional athlete who eats and breathes and sleeps mixed martial arts. Odds are you're going to be able to walk through a lot of punishment, and it'll probably affect you a lot more than we on the outside looking in really know. In this fight, Dominick Reyes, I thought, was the more effective fighter for the majority of this fight. I thought he won 3 rounds. You can argue that maybe he won the 4th, but in the most pivotal moments of this fight, he was tired. And I think that is something that really speaks to the judges. Ian, what are your thoughts on fatigue in a fight? And even if you're not necessarily losing the fight from the point of like getting hurt, but you are the one that is tired and backpedaling, does that sometimes, you know, let the judges go against you, even if you were maybe more effective, but you look physically worse in the cage?
Of course, posture is huge. The visual stimuli of seeing someone, their posture, they're here, they're backpedaling, it seems like they're weak. It seems like they're being pushed around. It changes the entire momentum of a fight. And when you can physically feel and see someone who is compromised in that way, when you see them, you know, you poke a hole in their boat and you see that start to leak out, you know, you start to drown them. You pull them in the deep water. That's what Jon is so good at. Jon is able to let people give them. They throw everything at him, and he just moves and takes it, and we'll take a little bit of damage, maybe more than we're comfortable with, but Jon's fine with, you know, because he knows he's going to end up in the deep end of the pool with you, pulling your foot down and just having you slowly just and when you. Whether it's the people watching, the fans at home, everyone knows what's happening, you know. But especially when you're a fighter, when you're an athlete, you know the damage that can be done. You know the advantage that's to be had at that point. Of course, I think Jon. You know, I think we can poke holes in whatever we want, but he could have taken more advantage of it. I don't think, from an analytical standpoint, he did quite enough numbers wise to keep his title, but when I say it with emotion, I look at it like, okay, I don't know if Dominick Reyes did enough to beat the champ.
Right, and I think that's a problem. You can talk yourself into an opinion and talk yourself out of it at the same time, and I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know how to come up with a clear defining language.
A big portion of it is the body language. It is seeing that Jon was on top. It was cardiovascularly or pressure-wise was on top of him at the end of the fight, and that's to me, that's a big part of it. So it's, you know, that's another thing we need to figure out how to add that in, how to make that applicable to a scoring setup.
Sure. Closing thoughts from Yves Edwards.
I think that's a huge part of it. I think that needs to be applicable, because there's one thing that we don't really recognize as fans watching it, as fighters. You know, we've seen fighters go back and post the stats and complain about the judges. And here's another thing that people don't understand. The judges don't. The only people who see those numbers are the fans and the commentators. As a commentator, I know that, but the judges don't see the punch stats. The judges don't see who landed what numbers. They just see what's happening inside the cage, and they're emotionally affected by that, whether it be one guy throwing an overwhelming barrage of punches or another guy looking timid or wilted or fading. And I think all of that plays into it. So then it gets back to human nature. Being a judge, it's down to being human, and you will make mistakes. But and it does suck. But at the same time, you're going to try to make the best decision possible, and so the criteria should lead you to do so. And effectiveness is also what you see.
Right.
You see things being effective. You see offense being effective. You see control being effective. You see the pressure being effective. But the numbers almost don't matter sometimes, because Reyes may have landed way more shots, but he's going backwards, and the judges see him going backwards as not being strong.
Yep.
So I can understand that completely.
And I think that, you know, the it's MMA and it's mixed martial arts, and in art, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think there's some truth to that in mixed martial arts as well. It's how you perceive things and how you value them. And on Fight Night, it's up to 3 judges to be the perceivers, if you will. Is that a word? Perceiver?
Get people who understand it.
Yeah.
But to be a good perceiver, don't you need real life experience to understand what's actually effective? And I think that's a massive issue in this whole argument. Another thing to think about, again, is this round by round scoring. And go out with me on a limb real quick, guys. What happens to Reyes if he thinks if he's now found out he lost round 3 or 2? Is he going to come out and he basically looked to me like he was trying to coast, because when he was forced to fight, he still had energy.
Yeah.
He was just afraid of finding himself in a moment where he could possibly gas.
Yep.
Now, if Jones also thinks that he's in a different position in round 4, does he not press Reyes more, and do we not see a possible finish in round 5?
I agree with you wholeheartedly, 100%. I think that the scorecards, if they were available, would directly change how both men approach the latter part of this fight, because Dominick Reyes,
way more finishes.
Right. Dominick Reyes, I think, in the latter part of this fight was fighting simply not to lose, because he thought that he had already won. And
he had energy in round 4. It's very obvious, because every time he was forced to fight or respond, he won most of the exchanges, and he looked faster and crisper. He still had that power.
Right.
But when your mindset is, all right, how do I not gas out now? Because that's all he's thinking about. He's not going to engage. His posture is going to change, because he's trying to conserve energy in any which way he can. Again, I just think round by round it changes a lot. And I saw you, Yves. Judges need real life experience. Judges need to know what a guy is resting on the cage and nothing's happening. He's literally just resting. Yep. He might actually be controlling that action, because guess what? If I push Yves up against the cage and Yves wants to be there, it's really hard to get off the cage, even if I'm the one putting him on the cage.
Sure.
So you see that all the time, where guys will be resting. They're not taking any damage. They're like, I'm cool here. And they're actually the one that's in control. And their back's on the cage.
It's the same thing to a fighter that is a jiu-jitsu whiz and pulls guard, and maybe he doesn't necessarily get the submission and wrap up the victory there. But if you are terrified of being in his guard and you were forced to be there, it's hard to say that you're in any sort of dominant or even 50-50 type of position. It's not necessarily enough to win you the fight or win you the round. But if I'm Mirko Krokop and I'm a great striker, and Minotauro Nogueira forces me into his guard, like, who's winning? Fundamentally,
if I'm Krokop.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess. One last question. What credentials do judges need to actually be judges? How do they get picked? Does anybody know?
It varies from state to state. Andy Foster in California has done a very good job at trying to mandate people get a lot of work, and then certification through John McCarthy's courses and Herb Dean's courses. But if you want to get sort of fast track to judging and refereeing and any sort of regulatory job in mixed martial arts, just move to a state that isn't as well defined as a California or a Nevada, or this is still it's a bureaucracy sort of deal too. So if you just know somebody somewhere, you might find yourself being
How do we change that?
Time, I guess. I don't know. Time. I hope. We keep saying that, right? I don't know.
We've been saying that since the beginning of time.
Pretty much. All right. Well, we had to close down shop. I like to finish shows on one random fact that ties everyone together. And not all of you know this, but you will once I tell you. All 3 of you gentlemen have shared okay food, but great conversation with me at the Coyote Grill inside the Tachi Palace Hotel and Casino on several occasions.
Oh, yeah.
And it's nice to chat with you again here.
We
Good to
definitely
see you guys.
conversation. The food, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, Eve, you and I, a lot of our conversation was like circling the parking lot trying to catch Pokemon. But
That's true. Yeah.
All right.
Go.
Door.
We gotta go. On that note, all right, bye.
All right.
See you guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Peace.
See ya.
Later, Ian.
We are clear.
See you, man.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.